I endured being the neglected daughter, while my golden child younger sister was showered with love. But after an argument about dirty dishes with my parents on my 18th birthday, they kicked me out of the house. Growing up, I always felt like the wallpaper in my own home, always there but never really noticed. It's not like I was expecting parades in my honor every day, but a little acknowledgement would have been nice, you know? If you ever wanted to know what being invisible felt like, you should have dropped by my house during one of my sick spells. Trust me, it wasn't like those TV shows where the sick kid gets pampered and fussed over. Nah, in my case, it was more like being part of the furniture. Useful, but not really something you pay much attention to unless it's in your way. This one time, right before midterms during my junior year, I caught the flu. Bad. I'm talking about the real deal, the kind that knocks you flat and makes you wish you could just sleep through the whole miserable experience. Now, usually a sick kid would mean a change in the daily rhythm of the house, right? Well, not in mine. It started on a Monday. I remember because I tried to get up for school and nearly collapsed back into bed. I was burning up, my head felt like it was being squeezed in a vice, and every limb in my body ached like I'd run a marathon the day before. So there I was, a snotty, feverish mess, barely able to shout a weak MOM towards the door as she hustled about getting Amanda ready for her big dance audition.
Can you check on me?
I croaked out as she passed by my room, her hands full of Amanda's sparkly dance costumes and makeup kits. I think I'm really sick. She poked her head in, forehead wrinkled more in annoyance than concern. Just take some aspirin and try to get some rest, honey.
I don't have time right now.
Amanda's audition is today, and we're already late. With that, she was gone. The front door slammed shut minutes later, the sound echoing weirdly in the empty house. It was just me, alone, feeling like crap and suddenly very aware of just how low I ranked on the family priority list. For the next 3 days, my room became my little quarantine zone. I drifted in and out of feverish sleep, waking up occasionally to the sounds of the house, Amanda practicing her routines, the clatter of dishes, the muffled tones of my parents' voices discussing everything and anything but me. One night, I lay there listening as they went on about how Amanda's audition went, her chances of getting the lead role, and what they'd do to celebrate if she got it. It wasn't like they completely ignored me. Mom would pop her head in once in a while, remind me to drink water, maybe leave some soup on the nightstand if I was awake, but it was all done in a sort of automatic check-the-box way that made me feel more like a son. Then there was Amanda. Look, I know it sounds like I'm painting her as the villain here, but she's not. She just caught up in her world, a world where she's the star, and I'm not even sure I'm in the cast. When she did come in to see how I was doing, it was usually on her way out, her sympathy quick and rehearsed before she dashed off to meet friends or attend another practice. Hope you're feeling better now, she'd say, not really asking because she didn't plan to stay long enough to hear the answer. It was during one of those sick days, though, that something shifted for me. It was a Wednesday, and I was lying there, staring at the ceiling, the house quiet except for the distant sound of Amanda practicing. I started thinking about all those paintings I'd done, stacked up against the walls of my room, scenes filled with color and life, and how in contrast my real world felt so gray and muted. So birthdays in my house? They're kind of a big deal. Well, at least when it's Amanda's. Mine, on the other hand, tends to get the short end of the stick, which is especially tough since our birthdays are just one day apart.
Yeah, you heard that right.
While she gets the red carpet treatment, mine is more like an afterthought, a box to tick before moving on to the main event. This year, though, was supposed to be different. It was my 18th. A milestone, right? Finally hitting that magic number where you're supposed to be an adult. I wasn't expecting a blowout or anything, but I thought maybe this time things might tilt a bit in my favor. Even just a little. I should have known better. I decided to take matters into my own hands. If history had taught me anything, it was that sitting around waiting to be disappointed was no way to live. So, I planned my own little celebration. Nothing fancy, just a dinner with a few close friends at a local bistro I'd been eyeing for a while. The place was cool, kind of quirky and laid back, just my style. They even had this little rooftop area where you could eat under the stars if the weather was good. I pitched the idea to Mom a week before D-Day. I caught her in one of her rare slow moments when she was in between organizing Amanda's dance life and her charity work. "Hey Mom, for my birthday, I was thinking maybe we could do a dinner, just something small at the bistro downtown. I already checked, and they've got space." She looked up, slightly surprised that I was planning my own thing. "Oh, that sounds nice, dear. Sure, we can do that." It was the first time in a long time I felt like I'd managed to get her full attention, even if it was just for a moment. Energized by this small win, I went all out. I booked the table, planned the menu with a restaurant manager, who was super cool about making sure we had options for everyone, and even sent out invites to my friends and the family. As the day got closer, I could feel the familiar knot of anticipation in my stomach. Not just for the party, but to see if it would actually turn out like I hoped. The night before, I laid out my outfit. A new shirt I'd bought specially, nothing fancy, but it made me feel good. I went to bed with a weird mix of nerves and excitement. It felt like maybe, just maybe, this birthday would be different. The day itself started off well enough. I got texts from my friends saying they were excited for the evening. I spent the day just chilling, saving up my energy for the night. Mom and Dad even wished me a happy birthday in the morning, which, was something. I showed up at the bistro a bit early, not wanting to seem too eager, but also because I couldn't wait to get the night started. The staff had set up the rooftop just like I'd asked, with lights strung up and everything. It looked amazing, and for a brief shining moment, I felt like everything was going to be perfect. 7 p.m. rolled around, the time we'd agreed on, and I was there, waiting. The view from the rooftop was great, the weather was perfect, and I was ready to have the best birthday. But then 7.15 came, and then 7.30, and I was still standing there alone. I kept checking my phone, but there were no messages, no calls, nothing. The staff at the bistro were giving me those sympathetic looks that just made it worse. They'd ask if I wanted to start with a drink or maybe sit down, but I kept saying, just a few more minutes, they'll be here. By 8, the reality had sunk in. I wasn't just being paranoid. Nobody was coming. Not my friends, not my family. Nobody. The weight of that realization was like a punch to the gut. I felt stupid, standing there all dressed up with nowhere to go, surrounded by empty chairs that seemed to mock me with their vacancy. I ended up sitting down, more to stop the waiters from looking so worried than anything else. I ordered food, mostly out of a need to do something, to fill the silence around me with the clatter of plates and the murmur of other diners who were actually enjoying their evenings. As I sat there, picking at food I no longer wanted, the hurt started to give way to anger. Why was it always like this? Why was I always the afterthought, the one whose feelings didn't seem to matter? I was so lost in my thoughts that I didn't notice the time slipping away, the sky darkening around me until the stars were out, witnesses to my pathetic solo party. I made the decision to phone Amanda in the hopes that she might have some answers. Since I knew I had to figure out what was going on, I was on the point of panic. But I attempted to seem calm when she answered on the second ring. She said in passing that she was at home when I asked her where everyone was. I was totally perplexed. She revealed something shocking to me when I asked when she intended to visit the restaurant. "Oh, I forgot to tell you," she added, "but we had to call off the celebration. Mom was not in good health." I was stunned. Why hadn't anyone informed me about the cancellation? I questioned her. I reasoned that there might have been a mix-up or a communication error. Amanda gave a startlingly casual response. "I'm sorry," she said. "I suppose I neglected to inform you." It was like a blow to the abdomen. They hadn't even bothered to warn me ahead of time. And here I was all dressed up, waiting at the restaurant. I made an effort to digest her words. I asked her if there was any way to save the evening if Mom was okay, or if there was any chance they could still make it. However, Amanda's answer was icy and contemptuous. "I really have to go now," she said. She simply hung up on me after that. I was hurt and left, sitting there in shock. It was incredibly difficult, but I tried to remain calm. I felt like I had planned this evening with a lot of work and had received nothing in return. Trying not to cry, I took in the view of the restaurant. I observed gatherings of friends and family taking pleasure in their meals. I felt even more alone as a result. I was sitting there alone with no one to share. The celebration or conversation with, the environment was so empty. It was painful considering how terrible I was sitting there. I observed someone walking through the restaurant's entrance while I was scrolling through my feed in an attempt to divert my attention from my mounting unhappiness. To my surprise, as I looked up, there was my grandfather. I assumed my mom had invited everyone, so I wasn't expecting him to show up. The sight of a familiar face honestly startled and relieved me. He said, "Happy birthday," as he approached with a kind grin. As he got closer, I experienced a wave of emotion. I got up and embraced him tightly. It was one of those hugs you needed when it seemed like everything else was crumbling. It felt like a tiny ray of hope in an otherwise dismal evening. So I thanked him for coming. Glancing around, he asked me where the others were. I was trying to hold it together and had been fighting back tears up until that point, but when he posed that straightforward query, it was as though a dam had broken. I was at my breaking point. That's when, in the middle of the restaurant, I started bawling. My cheeks turned red, and I could feel the tears welling up. Taking a deep breath, I attempted to explain the events that had occurred. I sobbed as I told him about how I had come early, how nobody had turned up, and how Amanda had called to let me know that Mom wasn't feeling well, so the party was canceled. I informed him that on my particular day I had been sitting there by myself, feeling utterly forgotten and abandoned. With patience, my grandfather listened, and I could see worry in his eyes. He told me he was so sorry and put a consoling hand on my shoulder. He claimed that he arrived as quickly as he could and that he was unaware of the cancellation. He was obviously upset by the circumstance, and his presence was a much-needed consolation. While we waited for my food to arrive, we talked to cheer me up. He told me some jokes and related some experiences from his day, though it wasn't as exciting as I had anticipated. His presence gave the meal a celebratory vibe. I felt a sense of relief as we spoke. I was disappointed by my family, but at least I wasn't alone. It was difficult to savor the cuisine to its fullest when it finally arrived. I was left with a bad taste in my mouth from the previous events, so I picked up my plate, more out of habit than appetite ever. The trooper, my grandfather, made sure to keep the conversation lively and interesting. He took advantage of the circumstance and kept me company. When my grandfather and I arrived home that evening, I was still feeling a little raw. All I wanted to do was crawl into my room and close my eyes. I remained silent in front of my parents. I simply headed directly to my room and shut the door. I was hoping for a little quiet time. A few minutes after the night's emotional roller coaster, though, I was startled out of my reverie by the sounds of shouting emanating from the living room. I made the decision to walk downstairs to investigate, as I was a little taken aback and concerned. The shouting grew louder and more fierce as I descended the stairs, and when I arrived to the bottom, I found my mom and grandfather engaged in a furious fight. My mother was furiously questioning my grandfather about how he was able to harm them. She spoke in a disbelieving and angry tone. I didn't know what to think. What they were arguing over was unknown to me. It was obvious that this was more than just a typical family argument. As I stood there attempting to make sense of the circumstances, I could tell from what I could see that the disagreement also involved my grandfather. It seems that my grandfather changed his mind after telling my mother that he would leave his house in his will. My mother was still the entitled brat she had been when she lived with my grandfather, who was quite angry about this, clearly unhappy over her treatment of me. He was also ashamed of it, his own granddaughter, during the heated argument. My grandfather turned to face me, inhaled deeply, and wished me a good birthday, and made his way toward the entrance. It was an odd time, a moment of conflicting feelings. His encouraging comments gave me some little consolation, but the turmoil that had descended was too much to bear. Without saying anything else, he disappeared, leaving me to stand there and attempt to take it all in. My mother turned to me and gave me a serious look when he left. She insisted on knowing what I had shared with him. The question took me by surprise, but I made an effort to remain composed. I just told it like it was saying nothing. After all, it was the real deal about how Amanda had casually stated that the party was canceled without properly warning me, and how I had been left alone on my birthday. Anger twisted my mother's face, but before she could say anything more, I simply turned and headed back to my room. Exhaustion and frustration mixed as I leaned against the door and shut it behind me. It had seemed like a long night, and I had hoped for a tranquil end to a challenging day. I eventually collapsed into my bed and attempted to quiet my racing mind. I wanted to skip ahead to the rest of the night because I was so emotionally spent. I felt even more alone after the argument, and I couldn't get rid of the feeling that I was a part of something much bigger than myself. I was left wondering if this was how things would always be, or if things would ever change. After the evening did not turn out at all like I had anticipated, I hoped for some sort of tranquility and a better start to the following day as I closed my eyes. The following day when I awoke, I had the impression that I was in a whole other universe. The whole ambience of the house seemed chilly and uneasy. I felt invisible because of the icy distance with which my family was treating me. In comparison to the typical pandemonium and warmth of family gatherings, it was quite different. As soon as I came downstairs, I saw that everything was ready for Amanda's birthday overnight. It felt as though a whole switch had been flipped. I could see my mom was feeling better since she was cooking like crazy and rushing around the kitchen. The aromas of what I could only assume were a large birthday celebration. Preparations filled the home, and I was struck with a wave of dissatisfaction and melancholy as I realized how different things had been from the previous night. I made an effort to control my feelings, but it was difficult to witness the party for Amanda being organized with such care. While I had been so ignored on my own birthday, I was still aching from being left behind and wounded by the disregard for my family because it felt like they had completely disregarded my feelings on my birthday. I made the decision to leave rather than merely sit back and watch them get ready for Amanda's party. I spent the night at my closest friend's place. After packing a few things, I needed to get away from the stress and chilly atmosphere of my house. I wanted a place to go where I could be understood and made to feel welcome. The home of my closest buddy served as a haven where I could at least experience a semblance of comfort and routine. Though it was an impulse choice, it seemed the proper one at the time. The strange thing was that my mom didn't even try to call me after I departed. No call or text asking me to return for Amanda's birthday was received. They acted as though my absence had no bearing on them at all. That was a serious blow to my already hurt emotions. It got me thinking, did they truly not want me around? Or were they simply indifferent to my presence and not interested enough to want to get in touch? I'm now writing this piece while sitting at my best friend's house and attempting to make sense of everything that has transpired. It's difficult for me to get rid of the rage and grief I'm experiencing. It's annoying to feel like I'm so unimportant to the ones I should be closest to. I'm attempting to ascertain how to handle these feelings and proceed. I'm contacting you because I need some guidance. How can I deal with having these feelings? How can I get past my feelings of grief and rage about what happened instead of letting this destroy me? I want to figure out how to get past it right now. Any guidance or words of support would be greatly appreciated. I appreciate you listening to my tale. Update 1. Hello to all of you. I have a lot of news to share with you. My residence has been evicted from me. Yes, the sound matches the drama. My parents evidently couldn't wait for me to go to college, even though it's just a few weeks away. The most insane aspect. It all began when I neglected to do the dishes. This is how things transpired then. One night my mother lost it totally because I hadn't gotten around to doing the dishes. She became really angry with me, accusing me of being entitled and ungrateful, saying that I never helped her around the house, and all that kind of stuff. She seemed to be exaggerating the situation greatly. I made an effort to clarify that it was only one night and that I had been really busy getting ready for college. But rather than being calmer, her anger just increased. Yes, I gave up on patience too. I retaliated angrily, telling her how I felt about the way they had treated me all these years, how I was always the one who was overdone, and how my birthday was just another instance of their disdain. After I let everything out that I had been holding inside for years, I was unable to control myself. I told her about my upset feelings over everything, including the emotional detachment and Amanda's preference that, as you may imagine, did not go down well when things grew incredibly hot. My mom shouted for me to go as her face brightened red, though not surprised. I was astounded. Although I had predicted this for some time, I didn't anticipate that something as unremarkable as the dishes would set things off. I left without waiting for any further drama. I laughed as I grabbed the bag and added some necessities. I didn't even try to provide a lengthy farewell or explanation. I had to leave before things worsened because I was too angry. I told my mother that I needed to be somewhere else for the time being and that I would return for my belongings when I went to college. I went directly to the home of my closest friend as I was heading there. I gave her a call to see if it would be okay if I crashed there for a while. Fortunately, she informed me I could stay for however long I needed to and was really accommodating. Ever since, her apartment has been a refuge for me. Now I'm at a loss on what to do. Update 2. Hello to all of you. Though it has only been a few weeks since my last post, I felt it was only right to inform you all on my progress. To be honest, I haven't been doing much of anything, although there is some news that you might find interesting. I finally had an opportunity to speak with my grandfather yesterday, following the entire ordeal of getting ejected and all. I had the want to tell him what was going on. I gave him a call and informed him of the entire disorganized state of affairs, my argument with my mother, the consequences with my family, and how I ended up getting kicked out. He had, to put it mildly, a rather strong reaction when he learned what had transpired. He became utterly infuriated. He was astounded that a matter as unimportant as dishes could cause such a heated argument. More than anything, though, he was angry with me for not getting back to him sooner. He replied that had I called him sooner, he would have been happy to assist me. He was willing to help. So hearing that feeling of relief was mixed with annoyance at how everything was happening at once. We ended up talking about what had happened and how I was feeling for quite some time. Having someone who was prepared to stand up for me and who could relate to my side of the story was incredibly consoling. He gave me comfort telling me that I didn't have to face this alone and that he was on my side knowing that at least one member of my family was truly supportive. Made me feel good. The day after tomorrow, my grandfather has made the decision to help me move my belongings out of my parents' house. Knowing that I won't have to handle this on my own is a great relief. He's going to assist me with organizing and packing everything I need for college. To be completely honest, I'm a little anxious about seeing my parents again at the house, but having my grandfather there gives me a lot more self-assurance. Update 3. Hello to all of you. I'm sorry to inform you that I have another update, but it is not a good one. With my grandfather's assistance, I was finally going to get my belongings from my parents' house yesterday. When we got to my parents' house, though, things took a terribly bad turn, and I was horrified to see that practically everything I owned was disappeared. As it turned out, almost everything had been donated or thrown away. Only a few worn-out notebooks remained. I had eyes I couldn't believe. It seemed like a complete invasion of my personal property. I had no idea what to say. I naturally brought it up to my folks. I asked them if they knew where all of my belongings had disappeared and what had become of them. They laughed at me in response. They genuinely chuckled. It felt as though they laughed at my anguish. I was in disbelief and devastated. I couldn't contain my tears as it felt like a final slap in the face when he saw how they handled me. My grandfather became enraged, though I could sense he wanted to approach them more forcefully. He maintained his composure despite having a red face. Rather than engaging in a heated dispute, it would be better if he just left. He decided, especially since I was already in such a vulnerable state, it wasn't worth getting worse. The tears really started to come when we got back in the car. I was sobbing quite a bit, feeling so emotionally spent and completely devastated. My grandfather, the amazing helper that he is, made every effort to console me. He expressed his regret to me for how things had transpired and expressed his wish that he could have taken more action. He lifted my spirits and made sure I had all I needed for college by assuring me that I wasn't alone and that we would work this out together. I went shopping with my grandfather. Going through stores and selecting necessities for the next phase of my life felt a little weird, while the pain from what had happened continued to sting. However, his generosity and perseverance in helping me get back on my feet meant a great deal to me. We were able to acquire a few necessities, and it felt good to know that I was prepared for the necessities. In addition, my best buddy informed me I could take everything I wanted out of her belongings. She promised to get me supplies, clothes, and whatever else I needed. It brought me great comfort to know that I had individuals who actually cared about me and wanted to assist me during such a trying time.